And I'm going to start by just flipping over to the UK Met Office website and their synoptic chart, which is kind of buried in their website, but it's actually one of the better ways of looking at the weather, I find. So this is what the weather, the synoptic chart looked like today at earlier today at midnight, and it's quite a busy looking chart. There's a lot going on. Despite the nice weather we had today, the UK Met Office has actually issued a severe weather warning for the Bristol Channel from the early hours of tomorrow morning into much of tomorrow. Easterly winds blowing down the channel and presumably down the Severn Valley
you can see them.
Is likely to cause serious problems. So they've issued a serious alert. Now, one of the things that you'll see on this chart, which you won't see on the Met Éireann chart, are what we call fronts. These things, I don't know if you make out my cursor meandering around these curved lines. Yeah. These blue and orange lines with little half circles on them or little pointy bits on them, they represent warm and cold fronts, and indeed occluded fronts. And that's pretty much a good illustration of what's coming at us for the coming week, or the coming 4 days anyhow, which as far as this particular forecast runs. And I'm going to skim through it very quickly. And I want you to keep a very close eye on this kind of area down here, very busy looking area, to see what's likely to happen there. And also these two spots here, these two X's marked on the chart, an indication that something may develop there. So this was the picture now at noon today. And I'll just go back to the start to show you the difference. So this area of high pressure is actually extended over Ireland a little bit better. It's a bigger high pressure zone, but the stuff, the menace as it were on the outskirts, again, I don't know if you can follow my cursor, there's a lot going on waiting for this front or this high pressure zone to either collapse or move away. And so let's go and have a look at what it's going to be like at midnight. Now, you can see the isobars here have narrowed. These particular isobars here, especially over the Bristol Channel, which is where the severe weather warning has been issued. And just go back again to what it was like earlier today at noon. The distance between those isobars, there's a difference of 4 hectopascals in pressure, is quite significant. Very light winds. And that's good news. You know, the winds most of today here were blowing at about less than 10 knots, which is ideal sailing weather, flat water, ideal sailing weather, what we like to see. But as the night goes on, the isobars, as I pointed out earlier, are narrowing, right? So I don't know how much you know about how wind circulates around highs and lows. So I'll just reprise that for you very briefly. This is a high pressure zone where we are. The X marks roughly the center of it. The wind in high pressure areas circulates roughly in the direction of the isobars. If you can imagine these isobars as corridors through which the wind is conducted. They go clockwise. So imagine the hands of a clock turning around this thing. And right out to here, they continue to do that. They circulate. Quite a large high pressure zone there, but that's going to reduce, that's going to shrink, and it's going to let some of these things in. Now, what we're looking at here is a cold front, and what we're looking at here is a warm front. And there's a trough here, and something may develop around that as the week goes on. But you've also got occluded fronts here, and these will feature later in the week. And what's happened there, and I'm going to explain the difference between warm and cold fronts in a minute with some diagrams. But what's happened there is the cold front, which always follows a warm front. So in other words, here you have a very typical situation where you have the cold front coming behind a warm front. Eventually, the cold front will catch up on the warm front, and the system will either decay or it will become occluded. So you will have a front with the features of a warm front mixed up, you know, with a cold front. And that's quite likely going to develop here as well. And it's already developed here. So we're going to move on and see what it's going to be like noon tomorrow. And again, you can see these isobars are fairly close. And these fronts, this occluded front is moving up. And it's just off the Bristol Channel there. And now it's sitting right over the Bristol Channel. So you're getting a mixture, by midnight tomorrow, you're getting a mixture of warm and cold front situations. The wind has gone slightly southerly now. We saw it was blowing pretty well easterly earlier. It's now twisted a little bit as that high pressure zone changes, and it has changed. So that's good news if you want to sail to, say, Balbriggan for ice cream in the morning. You'll have the wind on your beam. You'll have a nice reach up to Balbriggan. Bit of a beat on the way back, but you know, maybe you're not planning to come back. So these are the kind of things you learn by looking at weather charts. You learn what's likely to happen to the wind, how it's likely to change direction, or indeed increase in strength. For example, up here off the coast of Norway, you know, fairly deep low for this time of the year, 985. That's quite a deep low for this time of the year. And the isobars are very close together. So you're going to have gales, at least, in these areas, fairly strong breezes, making this area look like a picnic by comparison. And we'll move on a little bit further, and we'll go to noon on Wednesday. And this is what it looks like on noon. Again, a little bit of relief. Our wind has now gone southerly, so it'll be a little bit warmer. But these fronts are still hanging around. They're going to be creating some, I'd say, cloud, possibly rain on the southwest coast. And now we're looking at midnight on Thursday, or midnight on Wednesday, midnight Thursday morning. And we have these fronts moving over the country. So you might have showers, but you'll certainly have a lot of cloud across Ireland on Thursday. The wind's probably gone a bit light again. We'll have a look at an actual forecast to see what's going to happen there. But you can see the isobars are separating. But with those fronts, you will get localized weather situations. Showery situations often bring rain. And beneath clouds, if there's dense cloud, you'll often get increased wind locally. And there you can see the front has moved right over the country again, the occluded front. It's surviving for quite a long time. In fact, usually they kind of decay. So it's interesting that it's obviously been fed something further out in the Atlantic. A lot of activity further out in the Atlantic. So that's as far as this map goes. And now let's have a look at an actual weather forecast and see how that's going to affect us. So we're looking at Wind Guru, which is a weather forecasting service that we all use a lot actually here in Skerries, because we actually have an outpost of Wind Guru on the roof of the sailing club. And you can see it says Ireland Skerries Sailing Club. And what we have here is this little flag, which means that there is a station, a monitoring station for Wind Guru in Skerries Sailing Club. It's actually on the roof. I'll show it to you someday. It's a tiny little thing. It just revolves with the wind. Okay, I was saying when we were looking at the UK Met Office chart, I was saying that the wind is going to go easterly. And I'll just get back to Tuesday. noon on Tuesday. And you can see these isobars. The wind is going to follow those isobars. It's going to be channeled between those isobars. And the wind guru is pretty well confirming this. The wind is going easterly tomorrow. It's also going to strengthen. And as I said, those isobars are getting closer together, which always means the wind will increase in strength. And I hope you're able to see it, but up near Norway, they're going to have gales because the isobars are even closer still, right? So that's the thing to watch out for on weather charts. Now, to some degree, looking at weather charts like I've been doing is probably a bad habit when you consider how accurate modern weather forecasting is, both in terms of wind direction and wind strength, and even the timing of wind occurrences. Like this is telling me that at 3 o'clock in the morning it's going to be blowing 30 knots, that at 9 o'clock tonight, which is here, it's going to be blowing 22 knots. So it's getting breezier already, and it's going to be fairly cool tomorrow, I think, because of that wind blowing in off the sea. It's not going to get much better on Wednesday. It'll still be quite breezy. The gusts certainly up to 18 knots, which again is 20 knots indeed earlier in the day. And Thursday settles down quite a bit, although it'll be breezy in the afternoon. So these forecasts are pretty reliable if you wanted to go sailing. And if you wanted to pick a good time to go sailing, it looks like about 3 hours before midnight on Wednesday. And 3 o'clock, there's a 6-hour window there where you have the winds of 10 knots or less, you know, but probably not much consolation to you if you do prefer to sail in the daytime. So we rely on Wind Guru quite a lot in the Sailing Club. And I'll show you another beautiful feature of it is that you can look at this chart and know what the wind is doing in the Sailing Club or in Skerries. Now, I don't know if this reloaded properly. I had loaded it earlier in the day. But what we're going to do is just have a look at what the wind has been doing during the day, and we'll see if it is up to date. So I can click on that. See where it says 9.4 knots? Click on that. And something is cooking here. Here it goes. The problem with the internet today, of course, is everybody is at home watching Netflix. So there's very little bandwidth.
That's good.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's doing the same as on my phone.
What? It is. Oh yeah,
yeah,
you're checking on me there.
Yeah, because I have it on my phone.
Okay, so that's up to 6:30. Excellent. I think some of our pictures here are occluding what's in the rest of the screen, but you can see what the wind has been doing during the day. These little arrows give the wind direction, and it's been easterly since about lunchtime, pretty much. The center line is the mean wind, you know, average, if you like, wind. The dotted line underneath is the basic wind, you know, what it subsides to. And these dotted lines up here tell you what the gusts are going to be like. And you can't see it here because, well, I can't see it because it's hidden behind all our photographs. Gorgeous and all as you're looking. There is a little legend in the corner of the screen over here, and it's covered with Helen and Niche in my.
You can move the.
We can see it. We can see it, Jerry. It's okay.
Can you? Okay, because
you can move the photograph.
But there is a little thing that gives you percentage gustiness, and that gives you an idea of how often it's going to be gusty. Is there going to be a gust every 5 minutes? Is there going to be a gust every half an hour, every hour? That sort of thing, you know. So that's quite a useful facility. So you could look at it and you could see that even though the maximum gust is going to be 16 knots, it's only going to happen once every, what's that, about every 15 minutes or 20 minutes, you know.
Yeah.
Which is dealable with, you know, spill wind for a little while. So that's a fabulous way of doing your weather forecasting, and it has this fabulous thing, this chart, where you can see what the weather is doing in Skerries, as well as going back to the forecast and seeing what the weather will do in Skerries. And again, this is taking an awful long time to load. Yeah, here we go. We'll tell you what the weather is going to do in Skerries. So I'm going to collapse that, and we're just going to have a look now at some. So what we're looking at here is, as I explained you, well, that air is mixing from the north, dry, cold air coming from the north, warm, tropical, and by virtue of its warmth and tropicalness coming in off the oceans, it's going to be very moist. The warm tropical air coming up to meet the polar air. And they form, this is how a front and subsequently a depression forms. So if you can imagine that line as separating the cold, dry between them, they've got to mix. But air, warm air and cold air doesn't mix easily. Warm, moist air tends to be low over the sea, whereas cold air tends to rise over it. So they're not going to mix terribly well. And what they do, due to the impact of the Earth's rotation and a phenomenon known as the Coriolis effect, is you get this rotation. This is where the low pressure zone, the anti-clockwise movement of air is going to occur. You can see the cold air coming in and curving around, the warm air coming in and curving around the other side of it. And the line between them, and this is really an imaginary line, I suppose, but this line is starting to curve. And when you get an indent on that line, it's usually a fairly good indication that a weather system is going to form on it. And you're going to get a low pressure system developing here as these two different air masses try to mix. So moving swiftly on. And
sorry, Jerry, there. I think it might have, isn't it the warm air that rises over the cold? I think you might have just said that. Did you say that backwards?
Sorry, you're quite right. Warm air rises.
I don't mean to be getting on your case. But.
Yeah, no, you're quite right, because I'm, as Helen will tell you, I often get things wrong. So
we all do. We all do.
We saw the air.
Jerry is my God. Don't worry about it.
We saw the system developing, and this is just doing it in a little bit more detail. And you see the warm air preceding as a front, and the colder front, the cold front following behind it. And as you go through these diagrams, you'll see that the cold front catches up with the warm front. And if they don't decay, the cold front will overtake the warm front and form an occluded front. This is a sort of a typical situation where the two lines, the two fronts kind of meet and have a common genesis, if you like, in the center of a low pressure zone, but it doesn't always occur that way. Fronts can exist on their own. And you see here, incidentally, how the systems interact with each other. We'll show you that in a little bit more detail here. This is a typical warm front moving. Let's bring that down in size, yes. It's moving in this direction. There is an arrow giving you the line of direction. This is sort of, if you like, ordinary weather with cumulus clouds, perhaps not. You get these cirrus clouds forming, which are rising high. And when you can see these 24 hours before a front arrives, and they give you a fairly good idea of what's coming. This is very, very cold, moist air, very, very high aloft. Another indication is if contrails from jet aircraft remain in the sky. That's usually a fairly good idea too, that there is moisture aloft that's condensing around the soot coming out of the airplane's exhaust. So gradually you get this sort of angle, as it were, very, very high cloud, and as the front moves forward, you'll notice the cloud is getting thicker and denser until you eventually get to a situation where the cloud base is fairly flat and it is likely to start to rain. And it is raining along this flat area. eventually that area passes over and you're into the cold front area here. A cold front, whereas this one is a nice gentle angle which takes a long time to arrive and to announce its presence with panis cloud and rain. A cold front is fairly sharp, short, and vigorous, to say the least, when it arrives. So if you're thinking of going sailing and there's a cold front on the way, think again and keep an eye on the forecast, just to make sure that it's not a vigorous cold front, because the more vigorous it is, the windier it can get. After a cold front passes, you'll often get not just cumulus, but cumulonimbus clouds, very, very tall clouds, a lot of air moving up and down the center of these clouds, coming down in the form of very, very strong gusts to the surface. And you can have wind radiating out from the bottom of this cloud in almost any direction. So there are things to watch out for if as I say, a vigorous front is expected. This is what an occluded front looks like. And you can see the long high cloud that gently angles down to a flat cloud. The base of the cloud's fairly flat and fairly low. But the cumulonimbus activity, which again can be vigorous in an occluded front, and you might see this on Thursday, did I say we were going to have an occluded front going over? Although no rain is forecast, so I think it will be fairly gentle. So you could have the appearance of an ordinary warm front, just a bit of rain, and then suddenly you'll get these very, very heavy showers and strong gusts coming out of these winds or these cloud formations. So you need to keep an eye on that if an occluded front is on the way. 9 times out of 10, they don't pose any particular problem because they're beginning to decay. But you'll get the odd one that can be a bit nasty. And I don't know what we're looking at here. Have I mixed up these? I think that's looking at maybe that's the occluded front again.
It's more occluded.
Yeah, it looks like the same, just a slightly different version of the same thing.
That's becoming occluded, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It's certainly all the appearance of a warm front here, cirrus preceding it, and then the cumulonimbus following in behind. But a very short warm sector there. What we've described here is system wind, and this is how the weather gives you wind, and the direction, for example, can change when a front is going over. You can also get wind when there is no weather system. You might be sitting in the center of a very high pressure zone, like we have been most of the last 2 or 3 days. Very little wind, although that's beginning to change tonight. And we've experienced this numerous times in the sailing club, where you go out for a race on a Sunday morning. Sun is splitting the stones, very, very sunny, but no wind. And we're sitting around for half an hour. Helen puts up the postponement flag.
Race officers pulling their hair out.
Yeah, and eventually around noon, after extending the postponement several times, Helen gives up and says, you ought to go in and have a pint. So on our way into the harbour, the wind suddenly picks up. And we get this lovely gust of wind to bring us into the harbour, and we come shooting in on a force 3 or possibly even a force 4. And what's happened is the sea breeze has kicked in. This is a local phenomenon. If you were 10 miles out to sea, you wouldn't get it. It only happens at the interface between the sea and the land. And it takes for the land to warm up by about 5 degrees more than the sea before air starts to rise in sort of thermal masses heading up, because warm air rises. The warm air rises, it creates a, if you like, a partial vacuum. Cool air comes in off the sea to replace the air that's rising. And you get this circular system. It only goes out to sea maybe 2 miles, maybe not even that. But it's very useful if we're racing on a Sunday and it kicks in early. But if it doesn't kick in early, we end up going home very disappointed. So that's the sea breeze. You can get you'll often see people jumping into their cars and saying, gotta go to Skerries today. And they pack a picnic and they come charging out to Skerries, to be bitterly disappointed, because in Rathfarnham or wherever they started off from, it was beautiful and sunny and still. But on the coast, because of the sea breeze, it's breezy. And they're getting sand in their jam sandwiches and things like that. So that's the sea breeze. So that's a thing to watch out for. Another thing that has an effect on the wind locally is the land breeze. And I'm prompted by the photograph. I was going to move on to something else. But if you have been, shall we say, becalmed out to sea and you can't get home because there's no wind and your outboard engine isn't working, just wait a few hours. The sea breeze will die down around 4 o'clock, ish. And that's when you get becalmed. Well, if you hang around until about 8 or 9 o'clock, what's going to happen is the land cools, but the sea has kept a certain amount of warmth, which it acquired during the day. And this, we're talking about sunny days, obviously. And the sea breeze goes into reverse and it becomes a land breeze. And warm air, which you're now getting on, relatively speaking, over the sea, is rising. And the cooler air from the land, because the land is cooling down, is rushing out to meet it. So you'll never be becalmed for very long on a sunny day. So that's another example of a local breeze situation. Very, very useful if you're cruising, obviously, because you'll be sailing 24/7 kind of thing. We tend to be back in the clubhouse by 6 o'clock most days. The geography has a big impact on the wind as well. The mountains and valleys display what's known as katabatic winds, where cool air will come down the sides of mountains and slopes at quite a lick, and it can be very windy. Blessington Reservoir, for example, gets a lot of them, and people who sail on the reservoir will tell you about these when the conditions are right. We don't get winds like that so much, but we do get winds generated by hills and things, and in particular in certain weather conditions, wind coming down from the heights represented by Ardgillan and places like that can actually get quite strong as they come down the little saddle, as it were, in the hillside that leads down to Barnagira. And you'll often get fairly strong winds just off Barnagira when the wind is blowing from the west and the weather is, the air mass is, if you like, unstable. It rises on one side of the hill, and this hill is a bit steeper than Ardgillan, obviously, but it rises, it cools at the top. And cold air, if you've ever opened the fridge or the freezer in your bare feet, and you feel the cold air come out of the fridge or the freezer, and you'll feel it on your feet. And that's what's exactly happening here. It's tumbling down the hill, it's accelerating, and by the time it reaches the beach at Barnagira, it's even stronger than it was. Now, I think we're kind of running out of time, so that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about as far as the weather is concerned.
Right.
Any quick questions?
Helen?
Yeah, go ahead. You've no postcards, Helen, have you?
No, you're okay. I think I've answered everybody.
Excellent. Well, just to give you a foretaste of what's happening on Thursday night, we're going to talk about the tides. Again, very, very important thing for sailors. We need to know where the tides and the currents are coming from. It's not just the height of the tide, but the Irish Sea is like a river, if you like, that changes direction twice a day. So it's very important to know what the tides are doing and how they affect you. Next Monday, Helen is going to talk to us about things like the gear you might need to go sailing, and also about a bit about racing.
Racing.
Kieran hopefully will talk to us then on Thursday about safety, a very, very important subject. So we're about to be cut off. I'll bid you all good night, and
Thank you.
thank you for being such a
Thanks, Jerry.
Yes,
Thanks,
sir.
Jerry.